Hi and welcome to yet another car file. This week on the show we're going to be looking to the Far East. I'll be testing three cars that have a lot more in common than you would think. We'll be scoring them for interior and exterior styling, practicality, performance, and of course, very importantly, how much they're going to cost you at the end of the day. So let me introduce you to our three cars. First up, all the way from Korea, this is the Hyundai Getz. Our Malaysian beauty, the Perodua Kelisa. And finally, all the way from Japan, this is the Suzuki Alto. And of course, Brendan Coogan will be here with his alternative car.
Well, John, this week I'm looking at a car that may originate in the East, but it's had more than a little input from the West. Join me later to find out more.
Now, before we get down to the fun and games of the testing, let's see what our three cars have to offer. First up, it's the Getz. Now, up until quite recently, Hyundai were seen as, well, how do I put this? Manufacturers of some of the world's least desirable cars. But how things change with this, the new Getz. Well, Hyundai hope that it won't be long before they are talked about in the same breath as Ford, Vauxhall or Peugeot. Ah, the Perodua Kelisa. No, it's not a holistic therapy, but it's actually one of the car industry's best kept secrets. Although it was launched in 2002, you will probably have had more birthdays than there are Kelisas on the road. But don't let that or the car's unusual appearance put you off. And finally, Suzuki have built a reputation for building affordable 4x4s, and although the Alto isn't an off-roader, it certainly is affordable, as it will only set you back around £6,000. Okay, now you know all of our cars have a lot in common, so let's get down to the testing. And first up, it's exterior styling. Now, when I first saw the Kelisa, I have to admit I wasn't awestruck by its absolute undying beauty. Let's face it, it is no Ferrari. But after spending a bit of time with it, I have to say I have grown to like it. And I'd nearly go so far as to say that it's quite cute. Not convinced? Well, let's see, can I change your mind? From the front, there's more than a passing resemblance to the old Nissan Micra, especially with these oval headlights. Then there's these cute little tyres. Would you look at the little tyres? They're so cute. You want to take them home with you. Sorry. When you get around the back, well, the influence of the Micra is carried over into these taillights, which I have to say are quite nice. But what I really like about the Kelisa is its simplicity. From the side, okay, it is a very basic design, but Perodua knew that it's the front and the rear of the car that most people have a look at. So that's where they put most of their effort and hard work. And I have to say, round of applause. I think it was a very clever move, and it really has paid off. Although the Getz's manufacturing origins are firmly based in the Far East, there's no getting away that its styling is very European. It's sharp, angular and relatively stylish. Plus, it has more than a hint of the Peugeot 307's design. Don't get me wrong, it's not groundbreaking, but it won't look out of place on the streets of London or Frankfurt, which is just what Hyundai want. At last, after years of producing basically ugly cars like the Elantra, it looks as though Hyundai have cottoned onto the fact that it's one thing to produce a car that is affordable, but if it doesn't look the part, people aren't going to buy it. Unlike the Getz, the Alto still has a look of a small Japanese car. That's no bad thing, it just means that it isn't over stylish. It's soft and round, making it easy on the eye, but it will never have you fighting with the wife or the girlfriend over who's actually going to drive it. But if you want a car that's completely inoffensive and won't cause road rage, then the Alto is the car for you. Picking a winner in the style stakes was a lot more difficult than you may think. So after a lot of deliberation, this is what we came up with. First place goes to the Getz. At last, a small Hyundai you won't be embarrassed to be seen in. It's sleek, stylish, and if you cover the badge, you could easily be driving a car made by any one of the major manufacturers. Second is the anonymous Alto. Okay, so it's never going to find a home in the Tate, but if you want an inoffensive little runaround, you could do a lot worse than look here. And last in the style stakes is the Perodua. I know, I was going on about how cute it was earlier, but that's only from the front and the rear. Side on, the car is truly uninspiring. In the past, Far Eastern cars have been criticised for having bland interiors. As we've already seen in the show, manufacturers have addressed issues about exterior styling. But have they done anything about their interiors? Let's find out. Now, I'm not trying to be funny, but the exterior of a car isn't the be-all and end-all of everything. I want an interior that doesn't make it feel like a chore to get in and drive and won't leave me thinking, what planet was I on when I bought this car in the first place? Did I not see how shabby the interior was? And those things spring to mind when I get into the Suzuki Alto. It's not that the plastics are poor, it's just I can't stand another interior that looks like any other Japanese car. Okay, so that's my opinion, but it was recently explained to me as to why Japanese interiors are so bland. Put simply, traditional Japanese design is based on simplicity and function over styling. Hence the reason for these bland but reliable little motors. So maybe I have been a bit harsh on this little Alto. I mean, everything here works, it's close to hand. And the seat, well, you can sit on it. I mean, what more could you want? Or what more could you expect for the type of money that you pay for one of these? Maybe a bit of styling? Like its exterior styling, the interior of the Getz is very European, to be more specific, Germanic. There's the silver rim dials, the straight, precise lines of the dashboard, and the smooth closing air vents. General fit and finish are pretty good. When you press a button, you know that it won't fall off, while the plastics used aren't from the bottom shelf. All in all, it's quite a pleasant place to be. Maybe I've been spoiled, but usually when I turn a dial or press a switch, I expect them to last. You get the impression with the Kelisa that if you exert anything more than moderate pressure, there's the likelihood that things will come off in your hand. And again, like the Alto, the interior isn't the most interesting place to be. It doesn't help either that some of the controls are poorly positioned. For me, the winner in the style stakes is the Getz. It looks relatively stylish, has improved build quality, and is the most relaxing place to be. Second is the Alto. I know I went on about how boring it was, but at the end of the day it's functional and it's pretty well put together. That means in third place is the Kelisa. Although it feels like an original Mini, and everything works, you just don't feel like that you could stand being stuck in traffic for too long. Although our three cars aren't the biggest you're ever going to come across, they still need to be practical. So without further ado, let's see how our three little machines get on. Starting with this little Korean number, the Hyundai Getz. And straight away when I open the boot you can see it's quite narrow here, but there's loads of depth and it swallows up our shopping quite easily. There's also a nice little touch on each side, little shelves for putting your handbag. All I need to do now is buy myself a handbag. Oh, what colour shall I buy it in? Now Hyundai have tried to design a car that does appeal to us Europeans, but they haven't done anything fancy. There's no clever folding seats, but what they have given us is acres and acres and acres of good old-fashioned space. And I don't mean space for the passenger and the driver. Hyundai tell us that there are no less than 20 storage areas or storage bins in or around the car. And no, I haven't tried to count them all. In the front, well, there's loads of legroom and a surprising amount of headroom. And even though the seat doesn't really adjust that much, it is naturally quite comfortable. In the back, well, you'll fit two average-sized adults. But if you try to get three in there, I really do think it will be at a bit of a push. Although the Alto isn't the roomiest car I've ever been in, it does have a couple of plus points. The first of which is the boot, which is surprisingly generous and can be further extended with split folding rear seats. Again, like many small cars, passenger space is at a premium. Unlike the Getz, however, rear seat passengers will find anything more than a quick trip to the shops very uncomfortable, as there is a distinct lack of legroom. The car's other plus is that room in the front isn't too bad and the seats are surprisingly comfortable, if not very supportive. Although the Kelisa has 5 doors, it isn't the most practical proposition. For a start, there is precious little leg or headroom in the rear. Only the smallest of people will find a rear seat journey comfortable. Up front, things are a little better. There's enough room for 6-footers, but trying to find a good driving position is difficult as the seat doesn't adjust for height, and they are fairly unsupportive. As for the boot, well, you might as well forget it, as anything bigger than a wallet, well, depending on how big or how much money you have in your wallet, will probably cause you problems. Although all three of our cars are small, it's the Getz that offers the best all-round practicality. Not only will it seat its occupants in relative comfort, but it will also have enough room left over to carry whatever they need. Next is the Alto. Yes, it has limited rear space, but its slightly bigger boot means it just sneaks into second place. Which means that in last place is the Perodua. Unfortunately, its cute looks can't disguise the fact that the car is sorely lacking in overall practicality. Well, that's our first batch of tests done and dusted. And later on in the programme, I'll be seeing which one of our Far Eastern imports is the best to own and the best to drive. But right now, it's time for Brendan. And as always, he's got a unique alternative for us.
As most of us know, until very recently, Japanese cars were about as exciting as an episode of the Antiques Roadshow. But how things change. Japanese cars are now cool. They're de rigueur. I don't know what that is in Japanese. And one company that represents that more than most is Mazda. Following on from the 6 and the RX-8 is the brilliant new Mazda 2, a small car with a real sense of style. The old Mazda 121 was a nonsense, as it was obviously a rebadged Ford Fiesta. This new 2, however, is a completely individually styled model, although it is still based on the Ford Fusion. The front of the 2 carries on with the family look, introduced on its big brother, the 6, while the sporty front spoiler and integrated headlights make a sharp, stylish front. Unfortunately, the rest of the car isn't quite as sleek, mainly due to the car it was based on. But having said that, the Mazda engineers have done a good job of making a box look funky. One of the biggest leaps forward, which will please John, is the 2's interior. Unlike the other 3 cars on test, the designers of the 2 appear to have been given license to express themselves. But there is a downside. In their quest for style, you get a bit of a mixed bag. Sure, the instruments are attractive and well laid out, but as you move to the centre here, you're faced with a mixture of squares and rounds, of greys and blacks, and for some reason a big dollop of yellow in the middle, which doesn't complement anything. Still, the 2 is a major improvement on Japanese cars of the past. Now, a new 2 isn't exactly cheap. It costs more than any of the other 3 cars John's looking at. The base model is just less than £9,000. Plus, specification levels aren't that great either. In fact, the Kelisa will leave the 2 red-faced. On the plus side, insurance groupings for the 2 are similar to the other cars, ranging from 3 to 6. The 2 is available with 4 engines, a 1.25, a 1.4, a 1.6 and a 1.4 common rail diesel unit. In our opinion, you should go for the very willing 1.25 or the flexible diesel. With the new 2, Mazda are hoping to finally win over the hearts and minds of us Europeans, and I reckon they stand a good chance. By combining traditional values with modern European styling, they've managed to create a small car that you wouldn't be embarrassed to be seen in.
And of course, my old mate Brendan will be back next week with another unique alternative. Well, that's nearly it for part 1 of Car File, but make sure you join me after the break when I'll be seeing how our 3 cars from the Far East handle the mean streets of the West. Oh yes, I'll be road testing the Suzuki, the Perodua and the Hyundai out on the road. Make sure you don't miss it. Hi and welcome back to Car File. You know, you can't beat a bit of nosh during the ad break. On this week's show, we have 3 cars that are not only small and affordable, but they're all manufactured in the Far East. Cue the music, thank you. So far, we've tested them for styling and practicality. Later on in the programme, we'll be seeing whether the Suzuki Alto, the Hyundai Getz, or the Perodua Kelisa will give us the best value for money. But right now, it's time to see how they handle the stress and strains of the British road, starting with this, the Kelisa. Inside the Perodua Kelisa. Sounds like the name your mother-in-law should have. Anyway, it is quite airy, I have to say. I was very surprised when I got into the car to find that there's quite a bit of space around, plenty of room for elbows and everything. As far as power goes, well, it's not that impressive at all. It doesn't set the world on fire, let's say, with its engine. It's only got a 1-litre engine. In or around the city like this, when you are trying to get in and out of traffic, it is great, but when you take it out in the motorway, I can tell you, well, you will be a bit disappointed because you will have to do an awful lot of work through the gears to actually get any sort of performance out of it. It feels a bit like it should never have been brought on a motorway in the first place. That's what I found about it. Now, if you want an example of a car being very nippy around town, this is it. Oh, look at that. It's very fast off the mark. After that though, don't try to show off too much. Kind of slow down as if you've just done the great takeoff and you're kind of being very cool about it. Perodua decided to soften the setup of the Kelisa for the UK market, and I have to say it works well, even with the small wheels. There isn't a huge amount of body roll for such a small car. It's quite a lot of fun to drive. You'll actually get out of the car, even though getting into it you'll never think it, but you will get out of the car smiling and kind of going, whew, that was a bit of fun. I could do that. I could live with that every day. Now, one thing I really like about this car, this is what you have to do in town an awful lot, turn around because you went the wrong way, and the steering just seems to go all the way right around. It can nearly turn on a penny. Reminds me of London cabs. I mean, one of the other advantages you have with driving this car is, even though it does look very like a Micra, how many people can you go up to and say, I drive a Perodua Kelisa? Because everyone's going to go, a what? I have to say, overall, I am very surprised at the Kelisa. Perodua, well, not many people know them, but I'm sure they will start finding out about them, because this car is a lot of fun to drive, and it is the perfect city car. The Getz is available with 3 petrol engines, 1.6, 1.3 and 1.1. Although the Getz's engine is bigger than the Kelisa's, its performance is best described as weak. With only a weedy 62 brake horsepower, the Getz struggles with any kind of incline. And that's just with me in it. And only imagine how it would struggle with 5 people and a shed load of gear. Not a nice thought, I have to say. And because you'll be revving the engine hard to get the best out of it, you'll also encounter a fair bit of noise. The best advice I can give you is don't carry any passengers and try to drive either on the flat or downhill. Trust me, in the end, you'll be thanking me. In terms of handling, Hyundai has done a pretty good job. It's reasonably agile and the steering offers a decent amount of feedback. We head to Japan, and this, the Suzuki Alto. And the first problem I came across with this car, which is extremely annoying and it is wrecking my head, is every time I want to turn left, this happens. The wipers come on. Compared to the other 2 cars, the switches for the wipers and the indicators are on the other side, which is extremely annoying. Yes, it is something you will get used to after a while, but it's one of the first things I noticed about this little Japanese car. Now, as far as where you put your bum is concerned, the seat, I have to say, even though the seat doesn't adjust that much, it is extremely comfortable. It seems like you're sitting in exactly the right place. The amount of headroom you have, wow, I have to say, I'm very surprised. Look at that, absolutely tons of headroom. I'm 6'2", this is a small car. You wouldn't expect that much. Actually, you wouldn't even expect that much in a lot of other cars. I suppose I better start talking about one of the most important things, the performance, the mechanics of the car. I have to say, for such a small car, and with a 1.1 litre engine, you would expect quite a bit of poke. But unfortunately, it doesn't. It's actually very lackluster compared to the Perodua Kelisa. The Kelisa actually feels a lot pokier, and it's only got a 1 litre engine, so I actually found that quite disappointing. I can sum it up in 2 words. Not impressed. And one last thing that I don't like about this is, even though the car's got central locking, look, there's no central locking button to open everything. You actually have to do it with the key, which I think is a complete waste of time. There's no questioning that the hard work Hyundai has put in has paid off. Okay, so the 1.1 litre engine is pretty weak, but it handles well and it's quite involving, and it's a pretty relaxed place to be. Second goes to the Kelisa. Although it has the smallest engine here, it does feel nippy and it's actually an awful lot of fun to drive. Last is the Alto. In terms of performance, it's not much different than either of the other cars, but unlike the others, it doesn't do anything well enough to stand out. No matter which way you look at it, all of our cars this week are very affordable. You could even say cheap. They all come in at under £7,000, but which one of them offers the best all-around package? Well, first up, it's the Perodua Kelisa, which comes in at just under £5,700, and it's the cheapest of our 3 cars here today. But don't go thinking because it's cheap, it's basic, because it's not. You get power steering, ooh, electric windows, ah, and not alone that, you get central locking. As far as running costs go, it should return about 37 miles to the gallon, and it's insurance group 3A. The only downside to this car is, well, after 3 years, it will only be worth about 40% of its original value. So it's just as well it's cheap to buy in the first place. Next up is the Suzuki Alto, which just sneaks in at under £6,000. And like the Kelisa, it's got a good amount of standard equipment. But for that extra £300 you pay for this, you get a bigger engine, a 1.1 litre compared to the Koreans' 1 litre. Average MPG is slightly down on the Kelisa, be it by a measly 1 mile. And insurance-wise, well, this is going to cost you a bit more because it's actually in Group 5. Residuals, well, it's also going to be worth only about 40% of its value after 3 years. Last and most expensive is the Hyundai Getz, which comes in at just under £7,000. And like the Alto, it's also got a 1.1 litre engine and it's got electric windows. But although it's the most expensive of our three cars, it doesn't offer any more. Average MPG is no higher, insurance is no lower, and residuals are the same as the other two cars. So on the face of it, it looks like Hyundai, like their European counterparts, have decided that people are willing to pay that little bit more just as long as a car is manufactured by somebody that has a bit of a reputation. And fair play to them, if they can get away with it. Well, that's it. All the cars have been tested and the scores are in. The only thing left for me to do now is tell you the overall result. In first place this week, it's the Getz. After years of struggling to match their European counterparts, Hyundai have finally made a car that will have the traditional European manufacturers quaking in their boots. In second place is the Alto. Thanks to a nice new face and an ability to be average in most departments, the Alto isn't a bad buy. That means that in third place this week is the Kelisa. Although it offers great value for money and is quite fun to drive, it just has too many shortcomings to be an attractive alternative to the Getz. Well, that's nearly it for Car File for this week. It's been quite interesting with the three Far Eastern little machines. But make sure you join me next week. Well, we're going to have a lot of fun because we have the Porsche Boxster, the Lotus Elise 111S, and the TVR Tamora. It should be a lot of fun. We'll see you then. Good luck. Now, if you like some of the cars you've seen on Car File and wouldn't mind getting your hands on them, but don't want the hassle of a salesman breathing down your neck, we've got the answer. In a couple of weeks' time, we'll be reporting from Motor Drive Live, a show that actually lets you get behind the wheel of your favourite car. We'll be following 4 Car File viewers as they take to the Millbrook Proving Ground in search of their dream car, and we'll be bringing it to you exclusively on Men and Motors.